Before we start, if you enjoy the story, please leave a like and check if you're subscribed. The rifle scope revealed 3 heat signatures circling the crash site. Drake Sullivan counted their movements, breath steady despite the acidic wind tearing at his face. Scavengers always found the wreckage first on this hellhole of a planet. The metal was worth killing for, and fresh meat even more so. He'd heard the impact 2 hours ago, a screaming descent that carved a black scar across the rust-colored sky. Most crashes on Tarthos Prime meant corpses in salvage. Sometimes both were useful. Drake adjusted his position on the ridge, weathered hands checking the charge on his plasma rifle. 12 years on this rock had taught him patience. The scavengers would either leave or commit, and then he'd make his move. The wind shifted, carrying the acrid smell of burning fuel and something else. Scorched flesh. His jaw tightened. One of the scavengers, a hulking thing with 6 legs and mandibles that could shear through bone, suddenly shrieked and scattered. The others followed. Drake's finger hesitated on the trigger. Scavengers didn't spook easy. Something had frightened them more than hunger could override. He moved down the slope, boots finding purchase on loose shale. The crashed vessel was small, a personal craft with Kirvani markings still visible through the carbon scoring. His stomach clenched. The Empire didn't send scouts to Tarthos. This was a prison world, unsanctioned, forgotten. Nobody came here except the damned and the dead. The hull had split open like rotten fruit. Drake approached from the downwind side, rifle raised. Smoke still poured from the interior, mixing with the planet's perpetual haze. He swept the perimeter once, then twice, no immediate threats. That's when he saw her. Blue skin, darker where blood had dried in streaks down her torso. She'd crawled 3 meters from the wreckage before collapsing, one arm still reaching toward something Drake couldn't identify. The ornate armor she wore was crumpled on the left side, the decorative metalwork driven into her ribs. Cat-like ears lay flat against her skull, and her tail was bent at an unnatural angle. Kirvani, definitely, and from the look of that armor, someone important. Drake circled her body, checking for traps, for anything that made sense. Her chest moved, shallow but movement nonetheless. His tactical mind immediately began calculating. Alive meant complications. It meant questions. It meant every bounty hunter within 3 systems would converge on this location the moment her distress beacon registered. He should walk away. Her eyes snapped open. They were the color of Earth's oceans back before the bombardment. Drake found himself frozen as those eyes tracked his movement, lucid despite the obvious trauma. Her lips parted, blood flecking the blue skin around her mouth. "Human," she rasped, and somehow made it sound like a curse. "Yeah," he replied, lowering the rifle slightly. "Lucky you." "Kill me." Her hand twitched toward something at her belt. "Cleaner than what's coming." Drake glanced at the sky. She was right about that. The crash would have registered on every sensor array in this sector. He had maybe an hour before the first hunters arrived, less if they'd already been nearby. "Not really my style anymore," he said, crouching beside her. His hands moved automatically, assessing injuries. 3 broken ribs, punctured lung, compound fracture in the leg. The tail was probably broken too. Internal bleeding for sure. She'd be dead in 20 minutes without intervention. Her hand finally reached her belt, found something. A blade materialized, held in shaking fingers. "Don't," she hissed, trying to rise. The attempt lasted 2 seconds before she collapsed, gasping. "Don't touch me." "Then you die here." "Better than," she coughed, more blood, "your filthy hands." The shriek cut her off. Drake's head snapped up. The scavengers had returned, and they'd brought friends. 7 of them now, spreading out in a hunting pattern. They'd worked up courage, or hunger had finally won. "Hold that thought," Drake muttered, rising smoothly. The rifle came up, and he dropped the first scavenger with a plasma bolt that turned sand to glass. The pack charged. He killed 3 more in quick succession, each shot placed with mechanical precision. But 7 was too many for a static defense. Drake's free hand grabbed the alien woman's armor at the shoulder. She cried out as he hauled her up, her weight substantial but manageable. The remaining scavengers were closing fast. "If you stab me," he said, already moving, "we both die." She still had the knife. He felt the tip pressed against his ribs as he ran. her body cradled against his chest. The scavengers pursued, their calls echoing across the wastes. Drake's shelter was 2 kilometers north, built into a cave system that predators avoided. He might make it if luck held. It didn't. A juvenile scavenger burst from behind a boulder, faster than the others. Drake twisted, trying to shield the woman while bringing his rifle to bear. The movement saved them both. The creature's strike missed his throat, caught his shoulder instead. The impact sent them sprawling. Drake rolled, came up firing. The scavenger's head vaporized, but the others were seconds away, and his rifle charge was blinking red. The woman moved. Even wounded, she was fast. Her blade flashed in the dim light, catching the lead scavenger across its primary eyes. The thing reeled backward, shrieking. Drake fired twice more, dropping the last 2 pursuers. Silence descended, broken only by their ragged breathing. Drake looked down at her. She'd collapsed again, the effort of that single strike apparently exhausting her remaining strength. The knife had fallen from her fingers. She met his eyes, something unreadable crossing her face. "You're bleeding," she whispered. "Yeah." He touched his shoulder, fingers coming away red. The wound wasn't deep. "Come on." This time when he lifted her, she didn't protest. Her head lolled against his chest, consciousness fading. Drake adjusted his grip and started north again, leaving the dead scavengers and the smoking wreckage behind. His shelter's entrance was camouflaged, designed to look like natural cave formation. Drake pushed through the hidden door, sealing it behind them. The interior was sparse. Sleeping pallet, weapons rack, medical supplies scavenged over years of survival. A water reclamator hummed in the corner. He laid her on the pallet. In the better light, the extent of her injuries became clear. Worse than he'd thought. The armor had to come off, but removing it might kill her. Leaving it would definitely kill her. Drake's hands moved to the clasps. She stirred, eyes opening again. "What are you doing?" "Saving your life." "I didn't ask you to." "No," he agreed, working the first clasp free. "You asked me to kill you, but I'm told I'm a terrible listener." The second clasp released. She hissed in pain, but her hand shot out, grabbed his wrist. Her grip was weak, but the intent was clear. "You don't understand," she said, those ocean eyes boring into his. "You can't understand. Your kind never—" "My kind," Drake interrupted, meeting her stare, "invented field surgery, so unless you want to bleed out while insulting me, shut up and let me work." They held that locked gaze for 3 heartbeats. Then her hand released his wrist, fell back to her side. He worked quickly, efficiently, removing the damaged armor piece by piece. Underneath, her body was a map of violence. The wounds were severe, but he'd seen worse. Treated worse. The punctured lung would need to be sealed, the ribs wrapped, the tail splinted. He was reaching for the medical kit when her hand moved again. Not toward him this time. Toward the concealed weapon he'd somehow missed. The plasma pistol was small, elegant, and pointed directly at his chest. Her hand shook, but at this range it wouldn't matter. "I know who you are," Vera said, voice strengthening with conviction. "Drake Sullivan, the Phantom of Arcturus Station, wanted for the assassination of Ambassador Terrence Ward." Her finger tightened on the trigger. "You're worth more dead than alive, human, and I always collect." Drake's hands slowly raised, blood from his shoulder wound dripping onto the cave floor. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, they stared at each other across a distance of 2 feet and a galaxy of hatred. "Well," he said quietly, "this is going well." Drake didn't move. The pistol wavered in her grip, but her eyes stayed locked on his face. "You going to pull that trigger?" he asked, "or just threaten me while you die?" "I'm not dying." "You are. Look at your hand." Vera glanced down. Her fingers had turned purple at the tips, discoloration spreading toward her palm. The pistol dipped. "What did you—" "Those scavengers secrete paralytic toxin. You got scratched." Drake nodded toward her leg. 10 minutes before your respiratory system shuts down." She tried to steady the weapon. Her whole arm shook. Not from weakness, from poison. "You're lying. That burning in your chest isn't from broken ribs, and the numbness," he lowered his hand slowly, 8 minutes now. She tried to rise. Her body refused. The pistol clattered to the floor. Drake kicked the weapon away, examined the scratches on her leg. 3 shallow cuts, barely visible. The flesh around them had blackened. I can extract it, but you won't like the method. Just do it. Requires direct blood contact, skin to skin. The toxin breaks down when exposed to human enzymes. Vera's eyes widened. Among her people, such contact was intimate, sacred, but her lungs were tightening, each breath shorter than the last. Do it, she whispered. Drake retrieved a blade, sterilized it. The incision on her leg was swift. She hissed but didn't cry out. Then he cut his own forearm and pressed the wound against hers. The sensation was immediate and visceral. His blood mixed with hers, hot and foreign. Vera's back arched, a strangled sound escaping her throat. It felt wrong, invasive, like his essence was pouring into her body. Your people killed Ambassador Ward, she said through gritted teeth. 300 witnesses saw you fire the shot. 287. I counted them. Drake's hand braced her leg, and they saw someone who looked like me. Convenient. I was 2 systems away. Protection detail for Senator Yates. She was negotiating a mining treaty. His fingers pressed harder. The assassination happened during my shift. 15 people can verify that. Vera's lungs suddenly expanded, drawing in a full breath. The burning faded, replaced by different heat. Her leg throbbed where their blood mingled, but the numbness receded. It's working, Drake said, pulling away. He wrapped both wounds quickly. You'll feel sick for a few hours. She watched him treat her other injuries with impersonal competence. His hands were scarred but steady, nothing like the brutality her superiors had described. Why were you framed? Drake paused. Because Senator Yates needed Ward dead and humanity blamed. She needed a disposable asset. His voice remained flat. I figured it out too late. Vera studied his face. Truth or lie, she couldn't tell. The poison had dulled her instincts. But something about his eyes, the emptiness there, suggested a man who'd stopped caring whether anyone believed him. Admiral Tessar sent me, she said. The confession came easier than it should have. He wanted me to recruit you. Assassination job, suicide mission. He promised clemency if you succeeded. Drake's hands stopped moving. And you believed him? I believed in my duty. Your duty. Drake laughed without humor. Let me guess, you were supposed to die making contact. That crash wasn't an accident. Vera's silence confirmed it. The shelter shuddered. Outside, atmospheric engines whined, multiple ships. They're early, Drake muttered, moving to the weapons rack. Can you walk? Vera stood, her legs held despite the pain. She nodded. Can you shoot? He tossed her the plasma pistol. Their eyes met. Enemy or ally, they had the same problem now. The first explosion collapsed part of the entrance. Drake moved to a narrow passage at the back. See exit? Move. They ran through darkness, Drake's hand steadying her when she stumbled. The passage twisted, climbed, descended. Her ribs screamed with each breath. The passage opened onto a ledge overlooking the valley. 3 ships hovered below, searchlights cutting through haze. Armed figures moved in coordinated patterns. Professionals, Drake observed. Scaroth's crew, Vera said, recognizing the formation. He works for the highest bidder. Who's bidding? She didn't answer, didn't need to. Your admiral wants us both dead. Drake adjusted his rifle. Which means whatever he wanted me for is big enough to risk exposing himself? You know what the target was? No, he said you'd be briefed after recruitment. Another explosion rocked the mountain. Drake pointed east, where terrain broke into ravines. We can lose them in there, maybe. Maybe? Would you prefer definitely dead here? Vera smiled despite herself. Lead the way, human. They climbed down using handholds Drake had carved. Behind them, the shelter erupted in flames. The blast bought them minutes. They reached the ravines as hunters spotted them. Plasma fire scorched rocks, but Drake moved like he'd memorized every shadow. A hunter appeared above. Vera fired first, catching him center mass. Drake glanced back. Nice shot. I wasn't always an intelligence officer. They pushed deeper into the maze. Drake suddenly pulled her into a side passage, one hand covering her mouth. Footsteps echoed meters away. They pressed against cold stone, barely breathing. The hunters passed without seeing them. There's an old mining outpost 3 kilometers north, Drake whispered. We can fortify there. Vera nodded. His hand dropped from her mouth, but they stayed close, sharing body heat. She could feel his heartbeat, steady despite everything. Could smell the copper of his blood now mixed with hers. "Why save me?" she asked quietly. Drake was silent for a long moment. "Because leaving you would have been easier," he finally said, "and I'm tired of taking the easy path." They emerged from the ravine an hour later, the outpost visible in the distance. The hunters had fallen behind, confused by the passages. Vera's legs gave out. Drake caught her, one arm around her waist. The contact should have felt like violation. "It didn't." "Almost there," he said. She believed him. The outpost was a rusted shell of corrugated metal and crumbling concrete, half buried by sand and neglect. Drake kicked open the door, weapon raised, then swept the interior. Empty. Vera limped inside, breathing labored. Blood seeped through the bandages around her ribs. "Sit," Drake ordered, barricading the entrance. She collapsed onto a metal crate. Through grimy windows, searchlights swept the ravines they'd escaped. Drake moved to what had once been a comm station, began pulling apart rusted panels. "What are you doing?" "Seeing if anything still works." "To call who?" Vera's laugh was bitter. "My people want me dead. Yours want you dead." Drake's jaw tightened. There are always alternatives. "Like living on this rock forever?" She gestured at the wasteland. "That's not living. That's just slower dying." "Beats fast dying." Vera stood, ignoring the pain, her ears flattened, tail lashing despite the injury. "I didn't come here to hide. I came because—" She stopped. "Because you still believed in something," Drake finished quietly. "That serving meant something. That following orders made you one of the good ones." The accuracy stung worse than her wounds. "Don't pretend to understand me." "I don't need to pretend. I was you 5 years ago." Drake leaned against the station. "Took 3 contracts before I realized my targets weren't enemies. They were inconveniences. People who knew too much." "That doesn't make you innocent." "No, it makes me guilty and aware," he paused. "There's a difference." Vera wanted to defend the Empire, to explain that her people had brought order to chaos. But the words felt hollow. Thessar had sent her to die. "He wanted you to kill someone," she said finally. "Thessar told me the target was critical to galactic security, that only you had the skills." "Who?" He wouldn't say, not until after recruitment. Vera's hand moved to her belt, to a concealed pocket. Her fingers found the small chip. "But he gave me this, encrypted, said you'd need it to access the target's location." Drake took it, examining the encryption signature. His expression darkened. "This is military grade, core command level." He looked up. "Whatever's on here, it's not some rogue agent. This is something big." "Can you decrypt it?" "Not without proper equipment, but if we reach the old garrison on the eastern continent—" The window exploded inward, glass and plasma fire filled the space. Drake tackled Vera behind the crate as shots tore through walls. The metal shrieked, buckling. Vera rolled to her knees, returning fire through the shattered window. Her shots were precise despite the pain. Drake moved to the opposite wall, created crossfire that forced attackers to cover. A voice boomed from outside, amplified and harsh. "Sullivan, send out the Kirvani and we'll make it quick." "Scaroth," Vera said. "Friend of yours?" "He tried to kill me once. I broke his mating arm." Drake's mouth quirked. "Suddenly I like you more." The assault intensified. Drake grabbed a pulse grenade, armed it, hurled it through the window. The explosion lit up the night, screams following. But more came. "Back door," Drake said, firing covering shots while Vera limped toward the rear. A collapsed section of wall created an improvised exit. They squeezed through into darkness. The outpost erupted behind them, Scaroth's crew pouring inside. Drake grabbed Vera's hand, pulled her into a sprint toward rock formations. Plasma fire chased them. Vera felt heat sear past her ear, heard Drake grunt as a shot grazed his leg. They reached the rocks, dove behind cover. Vera's chest heaved, blood soaked through her bandages. "You're hurt," Drake said, reaching for medical supplies. "So are you. Mine can wait." He pressed a coagulant patch against her ribs. The chemical burn made her hiss, but bleeding slowed. His hands were gentle despite the urgency. "Why do you do that?" she asked. Do what? Care. You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Her tail curled protectively. I aimed a gun at your chest. Drake's hands paused. He looked at her, and Vera saw something unexpected. Not pity, not desire. Understanding. Because someone needs to, he said simply. The moment stretched between them, then searchlight swept across their position, and the spell broke. They're flanking us, Drake observed, trying to box us in. How many? 20, maybe 30, too many to fight through. Vera's mind raced, tactical training overlaying the terrain. Behind them was open desert. Ahead, hunters were establishing a perimeter. We could split up, divide their forces? No. The certainty in his voice made her look at him. That's tactically sound. I don't care. Drake checked his rifle. We stay together. Why? He didn't answer. The answer was written in the set of his shoulders, the way his body angled toward hers even while watching for threats. Vera's breath caught. This human was choosing her, not strategy, not survival, her. There, Drake said suddenly, pointing to a narrow canyon. If we can reach that before they close the net, we'll be trapped. But it's defensible. We can hold them there. It was a terrible plan, but she couldn't think of better. 3. Drake nodded. He counted down silently. 3, 2, 1. They broke cover together, moving as a unit. Plasma fire erupted. Vera fired backward without looking, trusting Drake to guide her. His hand found hers, pulling her through gaps in rocks. The canyon swallowed them, walls narrowing until they moved single file. Behind them, shouts echoed. But the confined space limited hunter numbers. Drake turned, rifle raised. The first hunter rounded the corner, and Drake dropped him. Then the second. The third managed a shot that ricocheted off stone. Vera fired past Drake, catching the shooter in the throat. They pushed deeper until the passage opened into a small clearing, dead end. Defensible, Drake said, taking position. Vera joined him, checking her weapon charge. Low, maybe 10 shots left. Drake, he looked at her. If we don't make it out, we will. But if we don't, I need you to know. She swallowed hard. I believe you. About Ward. About all of it. Drake's expression softened. I know. The first wave entered the clearing. They opened fire simultaneously, movements synchronized without discussion. Hunters fell, but more came. Between volleys, Drake's shoulder pressed against hers. The contact was brief, necessary, but it lingered longer than tactics required. The chip, Vera said suddenly. Decrypt it, and you'll know who Thessar wanted dead. Maybe that's leverage. Maybe. A hunter broke through, charging with a blade. Drake met him hand to hand. The fight brutal and fast. Vera covered him, dropping 2 more trying to flank. Drake's opponent went down. He retrieved the hunter's weapon, tossed Vera a fresh power cell. When this is over, he said, loading his rifle, we're having a real conversation. About what? About whatever this is. Vera's heart hammered. She knew what he meant, this impossible connection growing between them. I'd like that, she said quietly. The hunters regrouped outside. They'd be coming again soon, probably all at once. Drake reached out, his scarred fingers brushing her cheek. The touch was gentle, questioning. Vera leaned into it despite every instinct. Then she closed the distance and kissed him. It was desperate and fierce, tasting of copper and adrenaline. Drake's hand cupped the back of her neck, pulling her closer. Her tail wrapped around his leg. For 3 heartbeats, the danger faded. There was only heat and need, and the terrifying realization that she'd die for this man she barely knew. They broke apart as footsteps echoed. To be continued, Drake said, raising his rifle. Vera smiled, ears perking forward. You better survive, human. Same to you. The hunters charged. They fought until Vera's weapon died and Drake's rifle overheated. Bodies littered the clearing, but Scaroth's hunters kept coming. Drake used the last pulse grenade, the blast buying them seconds. Move, he shouted, pulling Vera toward a crack in the canyon wall she hadn't noticed. They squeezed through sideways, the stones scraping skin. The passage twisted upward, too narrow for pursuit. Behind them, frustrated shouts echoed. The crack opened onto a plateau overlooking the wasteland. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of rust and amber. Vera's legs finally gave out completely. Drake caught her, lowered her gently. His hands moved over her body, checking injuries. The bandages were soaked through, her breathing shallow. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough that we need to stop, find shelter." "They'll find us." "Let them try." Drake scanned the plateau, found an overhang that would provide cover. He carried her there, his own wounds leaving a blood trail. When he set her down, his leg buckled. He caught himself against the rock wall. "Your turn," Vera said, reaching for his leg. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding all over the ground. Sit." Drake sat. Vera's fingers worked the torn fabric of his pants, exposing the plasma burn. Deep, but clean. She used the last of the medical supplies, her touch surprisingly gentle for a warrior. "Where did you learn this?" Drake asked, watching her work. "My sister, she was a field medic before." Vera stopped, jaw tightening. "Before what?" "Before humans killed her unit in the border skirmishes." The words hung between them like a blade. Drake went still. "Are you?" Vera looked up, those ocean eyes searching his face. "Or is that just something you say?" "I'm sorry she died. I'm sorry there's a war. I'm sorry your people and mine can't seem to stop killing each other." Drake's hand covered hers. "But I'm not sorry I found you." Vera's breath caught. Her fingers tightened on his. "I hated you," she whispered. "When I saw you at the crash site, all I could think was that another human would take something from me, that you'd—" Her voice broke. "But you didn't. You gave instead." Drake pulled her closer, careful of her injuries. She came willingly, her head resting against his shoulder. They sat like that as the sun climbed higher, two broken people finding unexpected comfort in each other's warmth. "Tell me about her," Drake said finally. "Your sister." Vera smiled, the expression sad but genuine. "Mira. She was younger, always laughing. Used to say I was too serious, that I'd forget how to smile if she didn't remind me." Her tail curled around Drake's wrist. "She believed we were helping people, bringing stability. She died believing that." "Was she wrong?" "I don't know anymore." Vera looked out at the wasteland. "Maybe we were helping. Maybe we were just conquering and calling it something prettier. Does intention matter if the result is corpses?" "Sometimes," Drake said, "not always." They fell quiet again. Vera's hand traced the scars on Drake's arm, following the paths of old violence. "How many?" she asked. "Confirmed kills, 73. "Do you remember them?" "Every single one." Vera looked at him. Really looked. Saw the weight he carried, the ghosts that haunted those empty eyes. This man had killed and kept killing, but somewhere along the way he'd started counting the cost. "I have 46, she said quietly. "I used to think that made me a protector. Now I wonder if it just makes me a killer with a better uniform." Drake's thumb stroked her cheek, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "The difference is that you're asking the question." Vera turned her face into his palm, kissed the scarred skin there. Drake inhaled sharply. His other hand found her waist, fingers splaying across blue skin. "Vera, don't," she interrupted. "Don't think, don't calculate, don't tell me all the reasons this is complicated." She kissed him again, deeper this time. Drake responded immediately, his body pressing against hers despite their injuries. Pain flared from a dozen wounds, but neither pulled away. Vera's hands found the fastenings of his tactical vest, worked them open with trembling fingers. Drake's mouth moved to her throat, and she gasped. Her tail wrapped around his leg, pulling him closer. "We shouldn't," Drake started. "I know. You're hurt. So are you. This changes everything." "I know," Vera repeated, and pulled him down on top of her. Their bodies fit together like they'd been designed for it, human and alien finding unexpected harmony. Drake was careful despite the urgency, his hands mapping her skin with reverence. Vera arched beneath him, claws scoring his back in ways that made him groan. The morning sun warmed their intertwined forms as they gave in completely, pain and danger momentarily forgotten. There was only touch and heat, and the desperate need to feel alive after so much death. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breathing hard. Vera's head rested on Drake's chest, listening to his heartbeat slowly return to normal. His fingers traced patterns on her shoulder. That was, Drake started. If you say a mistake, I'll shoot you myself. He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. I was going to say worth getting shot for. Vera smiled against his skin, her tail curled contentedly around his leg. We still need to decrypt that chip. We do, and Scaroth is still hunting us. He is, and we have no plan, no resources, and approximately 10 hours before we both collapse from blood loss. Accurate assessment. Vera propped herself up on one elbow, looked down at him. So what do we do? Drake's hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. We survive, together. We figure out what's on that chip, and we use it. We turn the tables on Thessar and whoever else wants us dead. His expression hardened with determination, and then we make them regret it. That's a terrible plan. You have a better one? Vera thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, but I like yours. She kissed him again, slow and deep. When they finally broke apart, Drake's expression had shifted to something more focused. The garrison I mentioned. It's 4 days on foot, too, if we can find transport. He sat up carefully, wincing. There's an old data terminal there, military grade. It can handle that encryption. Can we make it 4 days? We'll have to. Vera stood, testing her legs. They held, though her tail still throbbed with every movement. She retrieved her weapon, checked the charge, empty. Drake's rifle had 2 shots left. Not much to work with, she observed. We've had less. A sound made them both freeze. Engines, close. Drake moved to the edge of the overhang, peered down. Scaroth's crew, they're sweeping the plateau. How many ships? 2, maybe 8 hunters total. Vera joined him, assessed the situation. The ships were moving in a grid pattern, methodical and thorough. They'd be found within the hour. We need those ships, she said. Drake looked at her. You're thinking what I'm thinking. If you're thinking we steal one and leave them stranded, then yes. It's risky. Everything's risky. Vera checked her weapon again, as if hoping ammunition would magically appear. We've got surprise and desperation. That'll have to be enough. Drake's mouth quirked into something almost like a smile. You know, for someone who hated me 6 hours ago, you've really embraced the criminal lifestyle. You're a bad influence. The worst. They moved down from the plateau using a steep trail that would hide them from aerial view. The nearest ship had landed near a cluster of rocks, engines still running. 2 hunters stood guard. Drake and Vera approached from opposite sides using hand signals to coordinate. When they struck, it was simultaneous and brutal. Drake took his target down with a chokehold. Vera used her claws, slashing across her opponent's throat before he could cry out. They dragged the bodies behind the rocks. Drake moved to the ship's access panel, began bypassing security. How long? Vera asked, watching for more hunters. 2 minutes. We might not have 2 minutes. Drake's hands moved faster. The panel beeped. Then the access door slid open. Or we might have exactly 2 minutes. Get in. Vera climbed aboard. Drake followed, sealing the door behind them. The interior was cramped, designed for quick assault deployment rather than comfort. Drake took the pilot seat, began firing up systems. Do you know how to fly this? Vera asked. I'm about to find out. Shouts came from outside. The other hunters had noticed their missing comrades. Plasma fire pinged off the hull. Drake engaged thrust, and the ship lurched into the air. More fire followed them, one shot hitting a stabilizer. The ship spun, and Drake fought the controls. Anytime you want to help, he shouted. Vera moved to the gunner station, found the weapon controls. She locked onto the second ship, fired. Her shot went wide. She adjusted, fired again. This time she hit the fuel cell. The explosion lit up the morning sky. The shock wave rocked their ship, but Drake compensated, pushing them higher. Below, Scaroth's remaining hunters scattered, stranded, furious. Drake set a course east toward the garrison. Beside him, Vera slumped in her seat, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. We did it, she said, disbelieving. We did. We actually stole a bounty hunter ship and left them in the desert. That appears to be what happened, yes. Vera started laughing. It began as a chuckle, then built into full-body laughter that made her injuries scream, but she couldn't stop. Drake joined her, and for several minutes they just laughed together like idiots, high on survival and each other. When the laughter finally faded, Vera reached across the console, took Drake's hand. "Whatever happens at that garrison—" "I know," Drake said, squeezing her fingers. "I know." The ship carried them east, toward answers, toward danger, toward a future neither could predict. But for the first time in years, Drake felt something other than emptiness, and Vera felt something other than duty. They felt hope. The garrison rose from the wasteland like a tombstone, half-buried towers marking humanity's brief attempt to colonize Tarthos Prime. Drake brought the stolen ship down behind the main structure, using the ruins for cover. "Stay here," he said, powering down systems. "I'll scout ahead." Vera's hand caught his wrist. "We stay together, remember?" Drake looked at her, then nodded. They exited the ship, weapons drawn. The garrison was silent, abandoned decades ago when Earth pulled its military presence, but silence on Tarthos usually meant something was waiting. The main entrance had collapsed. Drake led them through a maintenance tunnel, his movements suggesting familiarity. Vera realized he'd been here before, probably many times. "You use this place," she said. "For supplies, equipment, the terminals in the command center, 3 levels down." They descended through darkness using the light from Vera's wrist display. The walls were covered in old Earth military insignias, faded warnings about radiation and structural integrity. Vera's tail brushed against Drake's leg as they moved, a constant point of contact. The command center's door was sealed. Drake produced a code cylinder from his pocket, inserted it, the lock disengaged with a hiss. Inside, dust covered everything, but the terminal still had power, a single green indicator light blinking steadily. Drake moved to it, began initialization sequences. "This'll take a few minutes," he said, inserting the data chip. "The encryption is—" The words died as the terminal screen flared to life, not with decryption progress, but with a live feed. Admiral Thessar's face filled the display, his expression unreadable. Behind him, Vera recognized the command deck of a Kirvani warship. "Officer Vera," Thessar said, "I see you survived. How unfortunate." Vera stepped forward, rage coloring her vision red. "You sabotaged my ship. You tried to kill me." "I did what was necessary." Thessar's tone remained calm. "You were always too curious, too questioning, the perfect soldier but a terrible conspirator." "What's on the chip?" Drake demanded. Thessar's eyes shifted to him, and something like amusement crossed his features. "The truth, Mr. Sullivan, the truth that will end this pointless Cold War between our species." He paused. "The human colony on Arcturus Station wasn't destroyed by accident. It was a test." Vera's blood went cold. "A test of what?" "Of human resilience, of whether your species could survive extinction-level threats." Thessar leaned forward. "You see, there's something coming, something that makes our petty territorial disputes irrelevant. An enemy that doesn't negotiate, doesn't compromise, one that has already consumed 17 species in the Outer Rim." Drake's jaw clenched. "You're saying the colony deaths, 3 million people, were to test us? And you passed admirably. The survivors demonstrated remarkable adaptation, tactical brilliance under pressure, exactly what we'll need." Thessar's expression hardened. But the Kirvani Council refused to share this intelligence with humanity. They believe humans are too volatile, too dangerous to trust with knowledge of the Devourers. "So you wanted me to kill someone," Drake said slowly. "Someone on the Council." High Chancellor Velroth, the primary voice advocating for humanity's containment rather than alliance. Thessar glanced at something off-screen. "Your assassination would have triggered a cascade of political shifts, bringing warhawks to power on both sides. War would unify our species against each other, creating the military structures and alliances we'll need when the real enemy arrives." Vera felt sick. "You'd sacrifice billions for a war we might not survive, just to prepare for another war?" "I'd sacrifice whatever necessary to ensure any of us survive what's coming." The terminal beeped. The chip's contents began downloading to the garrison's archives. Files appeared, classified reports, strategic analyses, surveillance footage of the Outer Rim colonies being consumed by something that looked like living shadow. Drake's hand found Vera's, squeezed hard. How long, he asked, until they reach our space? 18 months, perhaps 20. Thessar's expression finally showed emotion, weariness. And we're not ready. Neither species is ready. But together, fighting side by side, we might have a chance. By starting a war between us first? Vera's voice shook. That's insane. That's survival. War unifies. War forces innovation, cooperation under pressure. The Council's policy of cold tension leaves both species weak, divided. Thessar's eyes locked on Vera. You understand strategic necessity. You always have. I understand you're a murderer justifying genocide. Perhaps, but I'm a murderer who sees the larger picture. Thessar touched something on his console. Which brings us to the present situation. You've exposed my plan. The chip's contents are now in Garrison archives, easily transmitted to any number of recipients. Drake's free hand moved toward his weapon. So what now? You kill us to bury the evidence? No, Mr. Sullivan, I offer you a choice. The screen split. One side still showed Thessar, the other showed a star map with 2 highlighted points. On the left, coordinates to a dead drop containing full pardons for both of you, classified human and Kirvani recognition of your innocence, new identities, enough currency to disappear forever. Thessar paused. On the right, coordinates to the Kirvani council chambers, full evidence of my conspiracy, enough to destroy my career and credibility. You become heroes. You stop my plan. And let your devourers catch us unprepared, Drake said. Perhaps they're not real. Perhaps I fabricated the entire threat to justify my actions. Thessar's smile was thin. You'd need months to verify those files, to investigate the Outer Rim. By then it might be too late to act. Or perhaps you'd discover I was telling the truth, and your heroism doomed both our species. Vera stared at the screen, mind racing through scenarios. Everything Thessar said could be lies, or truth, or something in between. Why give us this choice? She asked. Because you've already beaten the odds twice. You survived Tarthos, survived Skaroth, survived each other. Thessar's expression softened slightly. Because you represent something I thought impossible, a human and Kirvani choosing each other over tribal loyalty. That's the future we need, regardless of how we get there. The terminal beeped. Download complete. The evidence was now stored locally, ready to transmit. Decide quickly, Thessar said. Skaroth survived your attack. He's tracked you to the garrison. You have perhaps 10 minutes before he arrives with reinforcements. The screen went dark. Drake and Vera stood in silence, hands still linked. The weight of the choice pressed down like atmosphere. What do you want to do? Drake asked quietly. Vera looked at him. This man who'd saved her life, who'd chosen her over survival, who'd given her something she'd thought lost forever. Hope. I want to be wrong about everything, she said. I want Thessar to be lying about the Devourers. I want my sister to be alive. I want none of this to matter. But wanting doesn't make it true. She squeezed his hand. We need more information. We can't make this choice blind. Drake nodded slowly, then moved to the terminal. His fingers flew across the keys, entering commands. What are you doing? Creating a third option. He pulled up the transmission protocols. I'm sending copies of everything to multiple recipients. Human journalists, Kirvani dissidents, neutral third parties. Let them verify Thessar's claims. Let the public decide if he's a visionary or a monster. They'll hunt us forever. They're already hunting us. Drake looked at her. At least this way, the truth is out there. Both sides will have to acknowledge the threat, real or not. They'll have to investigate. Vera felt something loosen in her chest, not relief, but rightness. And us? We take Thessar's dead drop coordinates. We get our pardons, our new identities. Drake's thumb traced circles on her palm. And then we go to the Outer Rim ourselves. We verify whether the Devourers are real. That's suicide. Probably, but someone has to know for sure, and who better than 2 people both sides have already written off? His expression softened. We do it together. Vera pulled him close, kissed him hard. When they broke apart, both were smiling despite everything. You're completely insane, she said. You're the one who agreed to this plan. Fair point. The terminal confirmed the transmissions we're sending, data scattered across the galaxy to 100 different recipients. Within hours, the truth, or Thessar's version of it, would be public knowledge. Engines roared outside. Scaroth had arrived. Drake grabbed Vera's hand and they ran. Through corridors, up maintenance shafts toward the surface. Behind them, plasma fire tore through walls as Scaroth's hunters pursued. They burst into daylight, sprinting for the stolen ship. Scaroth himself stood between them and their escape, a hulking reptilian figure with murder in his eyes. His arm hung in a medical brace, the one Vera had broken years ago. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," Scaroth hissed. "Added it to my list of regrets," Vera replied, raising her weapon. The fight was brutal and fast. Scaroth was strong, but Drake and Vera moved like they shared one mind. When Scaroth charged Drake, Vera was already moving to flank. When he turned on her, Drake struck from behind. They danced around him, coordinated strikes wearing him down. Finally, Drake got behind him and Vera's shot took him in the chest. The hunter went down hard. More hunters poured from their ships, too many. Drake and Vera reached their vessel, sealed the door as plasma fire hammered the hull. Drake engaged engines while Vera took weapons, laying covering fire. The ship lifted, shuddering under the assault. One engine flickered, then died, but they gained altitude, leaving Scaroth's crew behind. "Where to?" Vera asked, collapsing into her seat. Drake pulled up the coordinates the SAR had provided. The dead drop was 3 days away in neutral space. "First we collect our prize. Then," he looked at her, "then we point this ship toward the outer rim and see what's really out there." Vera's hand found his. "No matter what we find. No matter what we find." The ship limped into the black, leaving Tarthos Prime shrinking behind them. Below, the garrison smoked from Scaroth's assault, but the data was already transmitted, already spreading. The galaxy would have to deal with Thessar's conspiracy, would have to face the possibility of the Devourers. But Drake and Vera had chosen a different path. Not heroism, not villainy. Survival, together. Vera leaned against Drake's shoulder as the autopilot engaged. His arm wrapped around her, careful of her injuries. Her tail curled around his waist. "This is probably a terrible idea," she murmured. "Definitely a terrible idea. We'll likely die out there. Very likely. And even if we survive, we're fugitives, enemies of both our governments." Vera tilted her head up, kissed his jaw. "Worth it, though." Drake smiled, the expression transforming his scarred face into something almost beautiful. "Yeah, worth it." The stars stretched before them, infinite and terrifying and full of possibility. 2 outcasts, 2 broken warriors who'd found something neither expected on a Deathworld designed to kill them. They'd found each other, and that was worth more than pardons or empires, or even truth. That was worth everything.